If you went up to a random basketball fan who maybe didn't know too much about the NBA and listed off Rudy Gobert's accomplishments, they'd probably say that sounds like a Hall of Fame career. Yet, if you ask some fans who are more into the NBA, or just take a quick scroll through some Instagram comments, you'll find labels describing him such as overrated bum, liability in the playoffs, or fraudulent defensive player of the year. So, which is it? Are things like analytics and accolades painting him out to be a caliber of player he isn't? Or is he doing stuff on the court and impacting his team in a way that a lot of fans just miss the mark on? For starters, I think it gets overlooked just how massive of a human being this guy is. 7'1" with a 7'9" wingspan. At times, it's almost like offenses are trying to score with a wall in front of the basket. Take this play for example. He first picks up Gallinari on a drive, who drops it off to Harrell down low, and when Harrell actually gets Gobert off his feet with an up fake, he thinks that's his opportunity to score. But that opportunity never actually existed. Here's another one. Chris Paul is able to penetrate the paint, drawing a rotation from Gobert, and when he leaves it to Capella, Ingles picks him up on a switch. Capella knows he has a big size advantage here and should have no problem getting a good look over the top, but Rudy's right there waiting. A natural adjustment to nothing getting over him at the rim is to take it a step further and utilize the short mid-range. Except when Thompson goes to a floater just a step in from the free throw line, well, that never makes it to the basket either. As a result, what you get is this massive deterrent just driving every attempt further. Many refer to this as the Gobert effect, and basically what it means is that instead of testing him, attackers would rather settle for lower percentage shots. This exact concept is what made him probably the best drop coverage pick and roll defender in NBA history, using that massive frame to make himself wide, which limits both Sexton's ability to drive and hit the roller. He instead goes to a floater, but Gobert's length still makes that a really tough shot. His size and positioning allow him to defend both the ball handler and screener at the same time. Bogdanović puts Ingles in jail, turning the action into a 2-on-1, so Gobert again shows his length, takes a little jab at the ball to bait a pass, and the result is a turnover. Here's another example. O'Neal gets taken out of the play by a screen, meaning that Gobert has to cover both Augustine and Tate. He first slides in front of the drive before recovering, then again jabs at the ball to make DJ think twice about attempting a layup, and it's another forced turnover. It works both ways. This time when he plays in between and takes his little jab at the ball, Ramsey still attempts the layup, only to get wiped off the glass. Here it is again. Harden comes off a handoff that creates a short 2-on-1 advantage, and this is a read he's completely mastered. Because Gobert takes away the lob, he thinks he has the finish, but in reality, neither were a great option. This one starts with a perimeter isolation. Gobert matched up with Capella in the dunker spot. Harden gets the step on his man, forcing Rudy to slide over, and against most bigs, this is an easy lob, but Gobert stays on the ground and swats away the pass. Because he can pretty much cover the entire paint when dropping back, what ends up happening is that ball handlers settle for long twos, which is exactly what the coverage is designed to give up. There are only a few guys in the NBA efficient enough on these jumpers to actually punish the defense consistently, so a lot of these guys are just playing into Utah's hands. When ball handlers decide to drive directly at him, attacking that space, I think you'll find that he moves shockingly well for someone of that size. And I don't just mean lateral quickness or agility, but rather body control, and how he can swivel his hips to change directions, just eating up so much space. He's gonna slide over to help deter Trae Young's drive, and as soon as that pass is made to the roller, he changes directions and takes off vertically to shut off the rim. Here it is again, sliding in front of the ball handler, but also recovering to the roll in timely fashion so that there's no opportunity to finish. And because he's so huge, what you'll see is that he can almost purposely commit to threats late. Both of his feet are planted when Mirotic takes off for a layup, and by jumping late, he essentially baits him into a blocked shot. As for his shot blocking, his timing and ability to target the ball are as good as it gets. Notice how when Ja leaves his feet for a scooping finish, Gobert waits for him to bring the ball down before turning his body and swiping at the ball. Because of that length, his radius as a shot blocker is absurd. Westbrook not only beats him to the spot, but also angles the release of his finger roll about as far away as he possibly can, only to get emphatically denied. It's not just around the rim, but also over the top of it. Fareed adjusts his shot to give it a rainbow type arc, but it doesn't even come close to dropping. Rudy's not an explosive vertical presence, but he doesn't need to be. As long as he's quick off the floor, it's nearly impossible to get the ball over him. Notice how he's just patiently waiting for Barnes to start his attack and shuffles his feet in a way that allows him to slow his momentum for a 2-foot leap at any given moment. And that quickness off the floor is what enables him to jump late and still make plays on the ball. Kobe White is already at the peak of his release by the time Gobert leaves the floor, but that's just a normal play for the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. From 2017 to 2021, what I consider to be his best 5-year stretch, Gobert averaged just under 2.5 blocks a game, only leading the league one single time. That's a good mark, but far from the heights that big-time shot blockers reached in former eras. I think some of that has to do with changes in playstyle over time, but I also think it's his own discipline as a rim protector, and how going for the block isn't always the best decision. When he takes off vertically here and Gordon adjusts his shot to sneak the ball around him, a lot of shot blockers would try adjusting their body so that they can attack the release, but he just holds his position and goes after the rebound. He knows exactly which risks to take and not take. Imagine this were Dwight Howard. I can guarantee with a certain level of confidence that this ball is getting volleyball spiked into the crowd. But by staying grounded and letting his teammate contest, he's able to secure possession. Here's another one. Westbrook pushes the ball in transition and leaves his feet as if looking to finish. He expects Gobert to jump with him, so he looks to drop it off to Adams, but Rudy instead plays the lane. His discipline also stands out when players try to hit him with up fakes. Saddiq Bey spams a few of them, expecting Gobert to bite, but it never happens and he gets rejected. Here it is again. Bam seals off Conley in the low post with Gobert flying in from the weak side, but instead of taking off vertically, he just hops very slightly to hold his position and saves the play. Because he's so disciplined, this means he's able to protect the rim at the highest level possible without fouling. Using that same 5-year stretch, he averaged less than 3 fouls a game, nearly a 1-to-1 ratio with his shot blocking, which is just ridiculously impressive. Over that time, he defended about 2,900 shots within 6 feet of the basket, and players shot more than 12% worse than their expected percentage on those attempts, meaning that a 62% shot was turned into a 50% one. In more descriptive terms, players who typically averaged 1.24 points per shot at the rim instead shot 0.99 with Gobert defending, 25 points per 100 attempts. In most cases with a number like this, it's amplified by secondary rim protection or great off-ball defenders around the guy. But that just simply isn't the case here. He's a one-man defense at the cup. No matter who or where he's defending on the court, he's always looking for potential threats and rotating down to the rim. You can see how he's patiently waiting for Anderson to get the ball in the middle of the floor, and as soon as he does, here he comes to clean up. He'll make some real high-level rotations to prevent layups. When Kemba gets into the defense and collapses the paint, that leaves Michael Kidd-Gilchrist unattended on a cut. Gobert recognizes this from the top of the key and slides down to wall off the rim. Here's another example. Nurkic is going to get into a dribble handoff action, and instead of forcing the ball to Rudy, Korver overplays the middle of the floor, giving up a baseline drive. Again, recognizing the threat early, the big man slides laterally to take away that initial angle, then turns his body to erase a reverse lay. This time Gobert's man is the screener in an off-ball action, and notice how his head is on a constant swivel, making sure he maps the entire court, just aware of everything going on around him. Then you get that ability to cover both the roll and the drive, baiting Parker into a blocked layup. Even when his matchup has the ball, initiating offense from out on the perimeter, he'll rotate down to the rim. O'Neal gets beat on a cut, so Gobert waits for the pass to be made before timing up his jump so that he can wipe a finish off the window. Here it is again. With Gobert out in space and the paint cleared, Chimezie Metu has space to seal off solid post position. But Rudy just shadows the entry pass like it has a magnetic field, and there's just nothing the offense can do to create offense at the rim. You'll have these possessions where he literally shuts off the paint from the entire opposing team. Notice how he's pre-rotated on the opposite block from his man so that if Westbrook beats Bogdanovic, he's there to turn away the drive. And when it instead gets fired over to Rui on a backdoor cut, well, he's in position to erase that as well. This time you're going to see Buddy Hield look to attack him in space, but that gets turned away without much difficulty. So he moves it to Halliburton for a quick attack off the catch. With Gobert glued to Richaun Holmes under the basket, the natural instinct is to look to score, only to get blocked on a scoop layup attempt. Because he's pretty much always in the right spot at the right time, and is so good at altering shots around the basket, he's able to clean up every single defensive error his team makes. Zion sheds Bogdanovic on a drive with ease, and when he tries to finish vertically, even adjusting his release angle to get it around Gobert, he's denied. Utah could intentionally give up advantages or play more aggressive coverages because they knew Rudy was going to be there to save the play. They send two to the ball in a pick and roll with Gobert in the dunker spot, and nobody else on the court has to scramble because he's capable of covering two players. The Jazz implemented a scheme that was focused on closing out hard and running shooters off the line to take away the three, funneling them to Rudy. And we already know how that goes. One thing I do want to shed light on is that I think a lot of people fail to account for how much harder it is to protect the rim in the current era than it was in decades past. Take this Dikembe Mutombo possession from the late 90s. He's matched up with a non-threat, so as soon as any threat gets near the basket, he can just abandon his man with no real consequence. That goes for a guy like Ben Wallace in the 2000s as well, rotating down from a non-shooter on the weak side to deter a drive, and when it's kicked out to a new potential attacker, well, he can just hang under the basket and wait for the ball to get there, as he doesn't have to worry about recovering to his own matchup. Every now and then the spacing gets messy and you get these 2000s looking possessions with Gobert on the floor. And it's in those short stints that you get an idea of what he'd look like in previous eras, the offense incapable of making anything happen. With that said, the reality is that with the way the game's played today, the ability to cover space does matter a lot more. Mobility and versatility are essential, and there's some merit to the idea that Gobert can be exploited at times. Houston put out a small lineup so that Rudy's forced to close out to the three, and Mbah a Moute has no trouble taking him off the dribble for 2 points plus a foul. But I also think he's not given enough credit for how much he's improved, and again, how well he moves for that size. Again, getting attacked on a closeout, sliding his feet to stay attached to the ball, and recovering with that length. I think that stands out quite a bit when he's defending the pick and roll, because against better shooters, he's shown to be capable of bringing the coverage higher. Durant looks to attack him in space, but he stays with him every inch of the way and sends away a layup. It's still a drop coverage, but it starts closer to the perimeter instead of camping in the paint. So Dame has to think twice about pulling up for three, but when he turns the corner, Gobert's still able to turn his body and recover from behind. Here's another one with Dame, looking to turn the corner and get by him on a baseline drive, and instead of testing Rudy, he's going to drop it off to Evan Turner. Here's where Gobert's body control really stands out, because he actually peels off the ball and changes directions to erase the cut as well. It's not all drop coverage either. When he's got better forwards behind him, he can execute more perimeter-based schemes. This is a hedge and recover, and because Crowder slides from the dunker spot to meet Jokic in the short roll early, that gives Rudy time to get back into play, and Mitchell makes a great play on the ball from behind. On this one, Gobert is actually going to call for a switch, telling Korver to pick up the screener, and by giving up the baseline angle, it's not actually a traditional blow-by, but rather bringing the ball into his trap that is the restricted area. When switched onto the perimeter for isolations, he offers a decent amount of resistance. Here he's matched up with the speedster De'Aaron Fox, stays in between him and the basket to not give up a drive, and actually gets a hand on the mid-range jumper. This time it's DeJounte Murray who looks to attack, getting to the rim and throwing a series of fakes that Gobert of course doesn't bite on, and when they reset from the corner, he's gonna try him again, leveraging the threat of a drive with a couple hesitations, only to get nowhere near close on a three-pointer. That size and length makes it really hard to get the ball over him, so he can sag off while still altering jumpers, and what you'll see is that he forces handlers into driving where his tools enable him to almost always recover. The main problem with bringing him out of the paint and onto the perimeter isn't his own lack of mobility, but rather how the lineups around him were often constructed with no sort of secondary rim protection. So when he steps out and blocks Kobe White's three, Utah is left with Mike Conley on Wendell Carter Jr. and Joe Ingles as the weak side defender. Needless to say, that's automatic offense for just about any big man in the NBA. Here's another example. Chris Paul comes off a screen and looks to hunt out a mid-range jumper like he's done so many different times, and Gobert's forced to stay attached to the ball and contest the shot. In doing that, DeAndre Ayton is left under the basket with Bogdanovic and Mitchell covering, so it's a real easy putback. I think these issues with roster construction and over-reliance on Gobert to cover everything are the main catalysts in what ultimately led to their defensive woes in the playoffs. But in the regular season, his statistical indicators are off the charts. With a league average offensive rating of 110.1 from 2017 to 2021, the Jazz had a 104.6 defensive rating with Gobert on the floor, 5.5 points above, what you'd expect from a top-tier defensive unit. With him off the floor, a 110.7, actually falling below average, and that 6-point swing is a historically great mark. If we take a look at some other notable defensive players and all-time 5-year stretches during the 21st century, you'll see that Draymond matches his net swing of 6.1, followed by Duncan at 5.5 and Ben Wallace at 4.5. If we keep going, we'll find KG, Giannis, and AD all in the 3 to 4 range, and a step further, names like Dwight Howard or Kawhi. Of course, there's more context to apply here, like opponent strength, who's coming on and off the floor at the same time, but it's clear to me that over an extended period of time, his impact on his team's defense is on par with the greatest of the century, and rightfully resulted in 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. As for the playoffs, I mentioned the team issues, but I do think that with the way the game's changed, and the fact that he isn't capable of covering ground in a way that Draymond, AD, or Giannis can, he probably does lose some value. As for how much, well, that's up for you to interpret. If I were forced to rank him as an all-time defender, I feel that he'd land just outside of my top 10 all-time, somewhere from 12 to 15 relative to the time he played in. I think he's the best rim protector of the 21st century, and if he played in an earlier time, I'm sure he'd get talked about in a vastly different way. But even in the late 2010s and early 2020s, he put together one of the greatest defensive peaks the game has ever seen. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Gobert. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.